People speaking multiple languages, have you had any funny instances where someone didn't expect you to understand their language? I'm American, but I speak a bit of Russian. A few years ago, I was in St. Petersburg and decided to buy tickets for a boat to Peterhof. All the signs at the kiosk were in Russian, so I had no trouble checking out all the prices. However, it was evident I wasn't a local, so the cunning saleswoman decided to sell me tickets at 3 times the price. In response to this audacity, I looked her straight in the eyes and retorted in pure Russian, but the sign clearly states that 1 ticket costs... You should have seen her reaction. Her jaw nearly dropped. Her colleague sitting nearby burst out laughing. As far as I know, this is a pretty typical story in Russia. 1 price for locals, another for tourists. I was walking with a friend, a German, in Italy, and warned him in German, "Bro, you shouldn't trash talk people like that. Who knows if someone understands us here?" A woman walking nearby added, "Yeah, like me, for example, Lioel. Near our student housing, there was a Chinese eatery where everyone spoke Chinese. Although I also know Chinese, I always spoke to them in English because I was a bit embarrassed about my accent. So usually I'd order meat with rice from them, but this time I already had cooked rice at home. So I decided to stop by just for the meat. I entered, placed my order without rice, and handed over the money. Then I heard the cashier yelling to the kitchen staff in Chinese, "This fat ass just wants the meat without rice." I heard that very clearly and decided to add in Chinese myself, "That's right. I've got plenty of rice at home." Since then, they always give me extra. And by the way, I wasn't charged a penny for that order. My girlfriend and I were trying to get home after a booze binge, but it was far, and we didn't have much money. So we found a couple more chicks who also needed to go in the same direction and offered to share a taxi. They agreed, we called a taxi, and on the way, they suddenly started speaking Swedish, unaware that my friend was half Finnish, half Swedish. I basically understand Swedish too, but at that moment I was so drunk, I didn't care about anything. Suddenly I got a text from a friend. "They don't intend to pay for the taxi." I replied, "Maybe you should tell the driver about it." My friend turned to the driver and said, "Don't let them out until these 2 pay half." He got the hint, locked all the doors, and they had to pay after all. I lived in South Korea for 3 years, but hardly learned any Korean. However, during that time, I met an English-speaking Korean who everyone thought wasn't local because she was very tall and spoke with a strong American accent, acquired during her studies in the USA and New Zealand. So when she went to continue her studies at an international university in South Korea, her teachers assumed she didn't speak Korean and often insulted her in her presence. She felt very uncomfortable about it but didn't show it and endured it for a whole year, until graduation. At the graduation ceremony, she took the stage in front of 800 people, and in perfect Korean, she delivered her speech, subtly reminding her teachers of the insults they used to call her a foreign pig. According to a witness, one of the teachers burst into tears of shame right there. It's a pity I didn't get to see that. When I was 16 and got a job at McDonald's, I ended up with a Spanish-speaking team who had no idea I also spoke Spanish quite well. Sometimes these guys made very rude remarks about me in Spanish, but I pretended not to understand them. It went on like that until a few weeks into the job when the manager approached me and told me that they valued him more than me because he knew 2 languages, to which I immediately replied in Spanish, "Cool, but I know 3. The guy was just shocked when he realized that I had been eavesdropping on their conversations the whole time. I'm half Peruvian, half Swiss, but I live in Peru. You would never guess from my appearance that I have anything Swiss in me. Once I was riding a bus and overheard 2 Swiss women sitting behind me chatting about the attractiveness of Latinos. Suddenly, one of them asked if her friend thought I was handsome. Without waiting for an answer, I abruptly turned to them and said, "Yes, I'm curious too." It was so opportune. Their expressions were priceless. There was both shame and confusion. But now I have 2 new friends. Changed. They spoke Swiss German. Changed too. Later they confessed that they both found me attractive. I'm an American expat in Thailand, and I have a big beard that attracts a lot of attention. Locals, unaware that I understand them, sometimes like to shout at me, "Look, a monkey, monkey," or "Want a banana?" or some other garbage. Usually I just ignore it because I don't want to talk to them, but there was one time when I couldn't take it anymore. So I was followed by 2 young girls, around 14 years old, and they just annoyed me with comments about monkeys. They're running around, screaming, getting on my nerves. I stopped, looked straight at them, and blurted out in fluent Thai, "There are no blue-eyed monkeys. They have black eyes, like yours." Their gift of gab was lost in the same second. While I was in Germany, my friend, an English teacher, she teaches in a secondary school, invited me to school to attend one of her classes. She introduced me to the students. I greeted them, said that I am from the USA, and happy to be present in their class. Then my friend says, "Guys, feel free to ask him questions in English. What do you think? What are Americans like?" Some dude in front of me decided to whisper in German, "Fat and stupid." He wanted to do it quietly, but it turned out that everyone heard his nonsense. The teacher blushes. The students laugh. I don't know what to do and quickly switch to German. "You're right, and many Americans also speak German." The unexpected comment almost made the guy poop his pants. At that moment, he looked like a little deer who accidentally wandered onto the stage during a Beyoncé concert. He really thought it couldn't be true that Americans understand German. Once me and my friends went shopping at the mall to buy some clothes. While I was hanging out in the fitting room, two store employees stood nearby and talked shit about me in Spanish. They were not happy that I was taking too long to try on clothes. They called me a stupid gringo, foreigner, and occasionally teased me, asking in English if I needed help. Only they didn't know that I have Spanish roots. So when I came out of the fitting room and told them in pure Spanish that, no, I didn't need help, they were just embarrassed. My aunt and I were flying to a resort for vacation. We were sitting at the airport, chatting in Finnish, waiting for our flight. My aunt had a broken leg, so she was in a wheelchair all the time. Important note, despite both of us being Finns, my aunt has been living in Germany for several years and is fluent in German. I've also lived there for a while, but my language skills are worse. So, it's finally time to board. The flight attendant sees my aunt in the wheelchair and offers us to go first. There's a displeased German couple nearby, and the man says to his wife, "I think they should ban disabled people from flying altogether." My reckless aunt asks me to slow down. I was pushing her wheelchair, turn to the man, and reply in perfect German, "Excuse me, sir, but no fracture can deprive me of my vacation, and what you said is very offensive to disabled people. I genuinely feel sorry for your wife. Have a good flight." He didn't say a word. The guy blushed and turned away. His wife was shocked. Although I'm Spanish, you wouldn't tell from my appearance. I have fair skin, light hair, and green eyes. When I lived in London, I often found myself in amusing situations. My favorite is when I once rode the metro home from work. So, that day there was a big football match, Chelsea versus Barcelona, and I found myself in the subway with a couple of fans heading to the game. At some point, the metro abruptly stopped. I couldn't lean on one of them a bit, and since I didn't know they were Spanish, I apologized to the guy in English. We're moving on. He's been savoring this situation in Spanish for about 5 minutes now. Phrases like, "Wish that fat cum had hit the floor," were used. Soon we arrive at their stop. They get off the metro, still mocking me, and I shout after them in pure Spanish, "Have a great game, shitheads!" Dudes were shocked. The door closes right in front of them. God, I must have been high for a week afterward. My stepmother's story. She grew up in Japan, speaks Japanese, but looks like a white Italian. She's only a quarter Japanese and doesn't resemble typical Asian residents at all. Once she decided to treat her friends to a small girls' night out and took them to a nail salon for manicures and pedicures. The women working there spoke Japanese and mostly gossiped about men and stuff. But when it came to my stepmother's pedicure, they suddenly switched to her. The thing is, she's not the slimmest woman, and her feet aren't exactly model-like. The workers caught on to this and started teasing her, in Japanese, obviously. They giggled and enjoyed someone else being less fortunate in appearance than them. My stepmother said she initially didn't want to react to it, but after 5 minutes of continuous trash talk, her patience ran out, and she finally responded to them in their own language. You know, I didn't think this establishment only served princesses. Maybe not word for word, but something like that. The smiles on the workers' faces quickly turned into endless guilt. They apologized in English and didn't say another word until the end of the procedure. I had a funny incident in Japan once. I'm walking down the street and I hear, "Oh, look at him. He's so hot. And he's even blue-eyed." My self-esteem soared. I turned my head to see my admirers, and there are these petite 13-year-old schoolgirls who looked even younger because they're Asians, you know? It wasn't as pleasant after that. Lived in Korea for some time. I go to get a haircut. The assistant hairdresser seats me in the chair preparing for the cut, and I hear her say to the hairdresser, "Wow, he looks like a baby." I was 22 then, but I did look very young indeed. So I ask, "Who? Do I look like a baby?" She got very embarrassed and abruptly ran away somewhere. But the hairdresser found out I understood Korean, and we switched to it. I'm Brazilian, but I've spoken English from an early age, so I can pass for an American if I don't talk too much. Once I had to fly from Atlanta to Rio. At the airport, I met two very beautiful girls who spoke excellent English and were flying with their mother. As I later found out, they were American with Brazilian roots and also thought I was just American. We chatted a bit, exchanged pleasantries. Turns out, one of the girls had a ticket for the adjacent seat. Then we board the plane. I put my luggage on the shelf, and I hear the girl's mother say to them in Portuguese, "Poor thing. He thinks I'll let him fly with one of you." So I turn to her. Reply also in Portuguese. "Don't worry, ma'am. I have a girlfriend, so I'd be happy to share this flight with you." Her. Oops. And she just sat there the whole flight, not saying a word. Haha. I don't speak much Spanish, but I have no problem understanding. I used to deal with used cars in Houston, and as you've probably guessed, I often encountered Spaniards. They never clarified whether I spoke Spanish because I looked like a typical white guy who knows nothing but English. It was amusing to watch as couples approached me and discussed their price negotiation schemes right in front of me. I always knew their cunning tactics and how much they were actually willing to pay. I often overheard phrases like, "I'll try to get $1,000 off, but if he agrees to at least $500, we'll take it anyway." After we settled on a price, I waited for the right moment to join their conversation and show that I understood them all along. Usually, after such revelations, they'd freaked out about it, and you could read "you bastard" on their faces. These moments were just priceless. Thank you very much for watching. In the comments under the video, you can share if you've had a funny situation where someone didn't expect you to understand their language. And don't forget to check out our other cool videos.